what inspired you to do what you did? So, like the part where you gave up your land, like your property to the First Nations.
Actually, my husband and I figured we were actually returning the land in New Brunswick, 280 acres. And we had been involved in the ochre crisis at a bit of a distance. Do you know what the ochre crisis was in Quebec? In 1990, the Native people there were bemoaning the fact that this golf course wanted to take over a sacred burial site, and they protested. And it became quite confrontational and even violent. And people across Canada got quite concerned about Indigenous rights to something that's quite sacred to them. And my husband and I thought, well, we're coming west to retire here, and that it would be an opportunity to offer the place to this native group. An elder had said she was looking for land for healing for her people. So that's basically how it worked out.
Excellent.
How did you go about giving your land to the Aboriginal people?
Oh golly, I was told to give short answers, and that would take a long one. It got quite complicated. At first we figured we needed money to purchase the place here in BC. So we were hoping that between donations and grants that this native group would be able to purchase the place at a very reasonable sum, and then when we passed on, the money would be returned. But in the end, they weren't able to do that. So we put a mortgage on the place here and just sort of scrambled and borrowed money, and somehow were able to get the place returned to them without it being an expense apart from upkeep. So that's about as short an answer as I could give you.
And by doing that, what kind of consequences happened?
Sorry, what was that?
What sort of consequences happened after not being able to do what you wanted to do by doing the grant?
Well, I guess sometimes when you meet a challenge that seems impossible, you just work away at it gradually, and I guess over time we were able to work things out, partly because my parents passed on and left me an inheritance that made it more affordable to handle.
What did other people think about your decision about selling the land, or giving the land?
A lot of people were very supportive, and they were the ones that donated and helped out in other ways. And then there were some neighbors that were very racist and made threats. But the one neighbor who was quite threatening, I hired to do some work there when I knew some of my native friends would be around. And somehow he just clicked with them, and that was the end of the threats. So there are surprising consequences sometimes.
Okay. Yes.
Why did you decide to hire this person who you knew was a threat?
The question was, why did you hire this person who originally was threatening you?
Well, he had been a friend, and I just figured that racism came out of fear and ignorance. So sometimes if you can find a creative way of bringing opposing views or seemingly opposing views together, then that could heal over that fear and a sense of racism.
It says here that you are a community advocate. What does that entail?
When I thought I'd written down, I thought that what does that mean? I guess A native friend who was learning English as a second language calls it common unity. And I love to think of that idea of community as being common unity. We're all one big family, whether it's locally or around the whole world. And I guess if you take that approach, it just means that you find your passion and you try to support what you see as good in your community. And I get the feeling, seeing this beautiful slogan up here, that's what all of you are doing in your own ways.
I was wondering, what was one of your favorite memories from Mexico while you were there working in the art department?
Well, it has lots of happy memories. They're such a warm people, the Mexicans. And you'd see that in Fernando, I think, Fernando, you said you've been in Mexico as well as Spain?
No, I am Mexican, so I was born and raised there, yeah.
And I guess a favorite memory would be from working with these little children in what was called the Manicomio de Miscuac, and that meant insane asylum. And these were little children who'd been abandoned except for very few, and yet they were so loving. And I had an opportunity as an art student to give them art lessons. So they just created the most beautiful artwork. They were called Little Picassos, and we actually had an exhibition of their work after a couple of years. And the art critics in Mexico City just loved their work because they were so expressive. That love in them just came through in their artwork. And I was thinking I should just pass these cards around. It ranges from the Parliament buildings that I understand you'll see in a few days to something like the petting zoo. And I'm wondering how many of you are going to be keeping journals on your trip? I see a few hands. I hope you all think of it seriously, because you'll have lots of time to do that as you're on the train a good part of the time. And even those who think you don't draw, it would be good if you thought of doing a few drawings. And just by writing things down, you'll think of things later on that you can pass on to your grandchildren that you might otherwise forget if you don't make a note of it.
What is the Canadian Who's Who?
Well, I think of it as a book. And the last I saw the price on it, it was $120. But now people tend to get it online. And I was telling Christopher Bowers that I tried to update my entry and was told that it would cost me $8 because I didn't have a password. So I think very few people are probably tapping into their brief biographies of people across Canada who, for one reason or other, have made a little bit of a little mark like me, or a big mark in Canadian history.
So let's just go for what's called a backup opportunity, right? She just sort of quietly said, we may have left a little mark in Canadian history. What question do you wonder about after she said that? Yes, go.
Why just a little mark?
Sorry, I didn't.
Why just a little mark?
Well, I guess I keep reminding myself it's important to be humble, and I think there are quiet ways that we can try to have some influence for good. So it could be a little mark, but it's like a wave. It just has repercussions over time. And you find that in your own lives, that you might do something kind and it just comes back to you and it affects others in a good way.
Would you consider your mark to be when you gave up your property?
Well, I think that's something my husband and I learned, we heard from the United Nations that it was the first time in Canada that private property had been returned to, in this case, it's a native land trust. And we thought when we came out here that we just settle down and retire and maybe work with CETA abroad. But then someone told us that the hill where we live, Gonzales Hill, is sacred to the native people. And we thought, well, we better find out if we should return our place in Oak Bay, South Oak Bay, on Gonzales Hill, to another native group that's actually formed for the purpose. And then a native friend said, well, what the native people really need is land where they can grow nutritious food. So I was able to get 1.4 acres on the Coxsackie River as well, and that's bequeathed to the same native land trust that is to inherit the place where I am right now.
How has returning the land to the native people, how has that changed your perspective and outlook on life?
How has giving back the land changed your perspective in life?
Well, it's helped me realize that land is so important in a spiritual way that I guess when I think of a neighbor in town who said that we shouldn't be returning an urban area to a native group whose traditions lie on that land that some consider stolen land because of the flawed treaties. But I asked an elder about that, and because the neighbor said, why not just sell the place and turn it into scholarships for native students going to use it? And the elder said, well, scholarships are hard enough to get for our kids, but it's really, really difficult to have land back. So I guess it's changed our perspective in a sense that a professor in Indigenous governance at UVic says all land is sacred, and yet others say, well, some land is more sacred than others. And if you look at it in a more spiritual sense, you just open it right up to thinking, well, let's do what we can to care for the land, and if it's desecrated, we can try and heal it and remediate it.